So the next item up, sounds like the price is right, but the next thing up is on-field protest.
Yes.
And you were specifically, when you wrote about it, you were thinking about Ferguson,
Right.
which has not gone away as an issue. But it's also the case that it seems that in a lot of these sports, players are increasingly being more outspoken about what is going on in their league and the front office and even what's going on in the country.
Right. I mean, I think you see players in a lot of professional sports. I'm thinking of not just the players who, for the Washington Redskins, actually, who came out with their hands up Ferguson, but also, a couple years ago after Trayvon Martin was killed, you had the entire Miami Heat squad posing hoodies and, folks want to make a statement. And I think some statements are okay to make, and some by the league standards aren't. I think that players are really vocal about issues that care to them, or that they care about and that matter to them. But I don't I think when I think of it, I think of that famous image of John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics, standing up with his fist raised and stuff, and you don't see a lot of that anymore necessarily.
Why not?
Because of the way that sports are policed. I think there's so little room for spontaneous acts like that. I think
policed how? How?
I when it comes everything from the camera angles, right? Because sports are so are basically these huge productions, right? The minute there's any sort of discord, cut away from the shot, right? So I mean, there's that,
and because the money in sports is the television,
right?
That's where the
and so they don't want you to do anything that will really embarrass the league.
And it's the biggest audience anywhere on television,
right?
And so they have a broad range of Americans that they don't want to piss off.
In terms of the really, really powerful statements that you see, you don't see necessarily Muhammad Ali's. You don't see folks actually sitting up and being yo, this is messed up. This is really messed up. For Black communities to be basically terrorized by police, right? And you have a lot of folks who come from these communities, and when I try to think about why folks aren't speaking out, it's hard. I mean, I think yes, the way that the league is policed, but then also, there's so much money involved. And if your livelihood is on the line, literally, if you could be cut from a team, I think that makes a difference. And I'm not sure how many players are willing to take that risk.
Yeah, because in the Muhammad Ali thing, I mean, there's that HBO movie earlier this year, he paid a price. Right. And that's something that, and I'm sure that's something that they're very aware of. Right. Because a lot of times these players have a lot of people that are relying upon them.
Right. You don't want to do anything other than do the sport, right? Play the sport, shut up and play the sport. And that's kind of how, in a lot of evaluations.
So shut up and take the money and be silent and do your job.
Do your job.
And that would make sense that then there's a lot of this, we were talking about earlier, a lot of, as you were saying, they have really messy lives. I mean, that can fuel that because you can't express yourself and be a real person. And,
You have to be sort of this machine, right? You can't be yourself.
How do they do it, I wonder? So then the thing is, how can you do all this? You can't express yourself, so how can you do this and not be crazy?
That's a really good question. And I mean, I think that, when I've heard players talk about their lives in the NFL, this is a very finite period of time, right? You're going to make millions of dollars for 10 years sometimes, but usually 3 to 4 years at most. And so can you deal with this type of lifestyle, for that stretch of time? And that's a really conscious decision I think a lot of people have to make.
And this also explains why there's so much pressure on their partners, because they have to. They're the ones that have to try to hold together this craziness.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. At home, because the guys can't, because the practice and all the rest of it. Right. I mean, it's.
But it's interesting because you see a lot of shows pop up now, reality TV shows, Basketball Wives, or just the Housewives franchise. You have former athletes' wives or whatever going on, and it's entertainment, right? So can you deal with being married to an entertainer and having to keep up this image or whatever image it is? It could be a dysfunctional image, it could be a really clean cut image, but can you do that? And I think social media and just our news cycle makes it so much worse now, because literally everything you do is being watched, amplified, yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see because Ferguson's clearly not going away.
Right.
Well, what will happen in terms of how it unfolds in the league and whether or not, there are more on-field team-wide protests about a lot of other things.
Right, so. Yeah. And I mean, you do have players, surprisingly, LeBron James is probably one of the most outspoken NBA players when it comes to issues of, relevance, you know? Like,
right.
he's spoken about growing up in a single-parent household. He's spoken about Trayvon Martin.
Yep.
And when I say spoken, I don't mean like he's actually gotten up and said something incredibly powerful, but given the silence everywhere else in professional sports, I think he's actually saying a lot more than others.
He's been in a class by himself, though, right? Because and he always has really good special relationships with his owners.
Right. So he knows his job security is fine.
That's right.
He didn't have to worry about any of that.
As long as he's bringing home the championships, he can say anything he wants to.
Yes.
Well, it's a hard place to work. I hadn't thought about it until we talked about it.
Yeah.